Now, on that note, you talked briefly about sun there, and I want to get your opinions on that because I get sun every day
I do too.
myself, and I don't wear sunblock. And guys, talk to your doctors about this. This is not standard medical advice, but I am convinced that sunblock is kind of bullshit.
I agree. I'm with you 100% on both things you just said. I get sun every day. I go out at the zenith when it's at its highest. I get 20 minutes on as much skin as I can expose and not get arrested. And and I don't use sunblock. You're not going to get hurt in 20 minutes, even at the zenith of the day here in Southern California. But what you will do is collect one of the most important things you can do for your health, which is natural vitamin D,
Mm,
which is really, in many ways, more of a hormone than a vitamin. And it is crucial. It's one of the best anti-cancer things you can do for yourself. And it's interesting that since the advent of sunblock, many kinds of cancer, including skin cancer, have skyrocketed.
right.
Sunblock is not really helping. I mean, obviously, if you're going to be, if you're not, if your skin is not acclimated at all, and you, for some reason, you need to be out in the sun for hours at a time, all of a sudden out of the blue, yeah, do something to protect yourself, obviously. But in general, the best way to do it is exactly as you said: get a little bit of sun every day. Again, Kaizen, a little bit every day.
Yep. Well, and I'll tell you, I try to keep anything artificial out of my body and off my body because
Right.
your skin is permeable. Stuff you
Oh,
slather on your skin, it gets into your system. So I'm a fanatic about this stuff. I put, filters on a shower. And in fact, if I
shower.
travel,
I do
I
too.
make sure that the water getting into my skin is not fluoridated. I try not to swim in a chlorinated pool. I don't want to put, if I use a sunblock, I'm going to use a natural sunblock. There are all alternatives out there that
Right.
don't have these crazy artificial chemicals. We don't know what these things are doing to our
Yeah.
bodies.
Yeah. If you can't pronounce it, don't eat it and don't put it on your skin.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing about this here now. Listen, this is a kind of a battle between I guess the Western medical system as it is right now, and a lot of people who want to see things in a different way. Um, do your own research on this, guys, but I am convinced that there is a tremendous amount of corruption in that. We know this historically, right? We know, for example, that the tobacco industry went out and lied to people to sell their stuff. I'm pretty sure that's happening in big pharma as well. And unfortunately,
Yeah.
the medical doctors who come out of that system are inculcated into that same way of thinking. And you'll see all sorts of what is called astroturf all over the internet. This is stuff that industry puts out to mislead people. So you'll
Right.
see information out there that will deliberately mislead people about the dangers of certain things. So, for example, they'll say something like proven safe. Now,
Uh,
that is totally contra to my understanding of science in general, because if you say
right.
something is proven safe, you are presupposing an omniscience that we don't have. We don't
Right.
have all of the data sets. You cannot prove something is safe without having a full and complete data set
Right. In
because
all
we're just,
circumstances, in all situations. No.
that's it. So,
Yeah.
I think as a general rule, keeping things natural.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are things in nature that are bad for you. That's another way that people will dismiss that philosophy. They'll say, "Well, what about hemlock?" Well, of course, you don't go eat toadstools. But as a general rule, put stuff in that's natural, and that's a nice segue into diet. Now, you and I used to both do what was called 80-10-10
Right.
raw veganism, and we both got off that. So
Yep.
let's hear about your journey there.
Yeah, well, I heard about that, and I had been back way back in the dinosaur era when I was in my 20s. I went vegetarian for actually 13 years. Now check this out. I was vegetarian for 13 years. I also started that right when I began. This was 1975 when I began the practice of transcendental meditation, the
Mm,
old school mantra transit, not with the earphones and the auto meditation kind of stuff that we had today, but the old school, mantra: stay with your mantra, and if thoughts arise, don't try and block them, just come back to the mantra. And I meditated twice a day without fail for 13 years.
Mm.
Did not miss one. And that's when I was out there touring with Zappa, touring with Stevie Nicks and Michael McDonald and Bette Midler and all these people. And it's kind of hard to keep that lifestyle, that control over your lifestyle when you're in that situation. But I did it for 13 years. I did not miss a meditation for 13 years, and I was
Wow.
vegetarian. And then I came out of that and drifted back into more of an omnivore kind of the eating style. I mean, again, as you know, quote unquote knowledge and science of nutrition changes over time, and we discover things. I was a kid back in the 50s when Eisenhower was president, and the whole thing that really started and is, in my view, largely responsible for the massive uh, uh, diabetes and obesity problem that we see in the world now came from a misdiagnosis by Eisenhower's doctor, where he decided that fat and cholesterol was the enemy and we should be eating lots of grains.
Mm.
I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think that's the root of the problem. But anyway, along with all those bits of knowledge that you and I have gained over the years, and we all have gained over the years, it's come kind of back around full circle now, and we understand that fats are not the enemy. Cholesterol is not the enemy. Every single cell in your body requires cholesterol in order to survive.
Mm.
We need these things. Of course, you have to do it in a healthy way. You can't just be, trans fats. No, no, no. Stay away from them. But healthy fats are a whole different thing. But again, like you were saying, I went through that same situation. I went the whole low fat, the 80-10-10, which is 80% carbs, 10% protein, 10% fat. That's uh, I don't know. When I look back at it now, I think, geez, what were we thinking, and what are those people thinking that still do that?
Yeah.
But again, it's largely, as you pointed out. I mean, we have been force fed all kinds of information from people that don't necessarily have our best interest in mind. Some of it, massive big farming operations, big pharmaceutical operations. And we've been given a lot of bad information that is now finally, thanks to the internet, for one thing, it's pretty hard to pull things over on people anymore, because we have the huge advantage of information instantaneously available on the internet. And so I've come around. I did that for 5 years. And of course, now again, you can call it a craze. Ketogenic is the big new quote unquote fad, but I don't think it's really a fad at all. If it's viable and scientifically, supported, and there are reasons to do it, and if within your own experience you have evidence to support it as well, which I have, and I'm sure you have as well.
Mm.
You make changes. You say, "Whoops, I was wrong." That's another thing that we all need to get really good at, saying, "Oops, I was wrong."
Now, there's a tremendous amount of wisdom right there. Most people get their beliefs tied up with their ego.
Right.
And, this is why, in the Simpleology print book, we talk about this concept of utilitarian model flexibility. It's saying,
Okay.
hey,
Great.
we don't have enough information to understand the universe completely, but we can adapt a model situationally and say, hey, you know what, in this particular situation, I got this result doing this. Now, that doesn't mean that that is the capital T and be all end all truth of all things, right? What it means is that in that situation, you use that. So one classic example I love to bring up is, we disproved a lot of Newtonian physics when we found out that those laws don't apply at the subatomic level. But you know
Right.
what? When I was an artillery officer in the Army, Newtonian physics worked just great. Right?
Absolutely. And if you need to sail from one place on the planet to the other, Newtonian physics are going to work just fine.
Exactly. But if you're trying to find out what particles are doing, it's not
Right.
going to do you much good at all.
Right.
So when you switched, so really quickly, what happened to you on 80-10-10? And so folks know that we're talking about mainly a fruitarian diet, more or
Right.
less. There's some
Right.
nuance there. And
Tons of.
some people can do it. Some people seem to be doing okay on it still, but I had problems, and I think you did too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What happened?
Well, what I noticed was that I felt like it seemed to be good for a while, but then I wasn't maintaining muscle like I wanted to. I started to realize that my hormonal balance was out of whack.
Yeah.
There are lots of different theories about diet and who should eat what. And now there are, some people believe it's that blood type is a key factor. Some people believe that what your father and grandfather and great grandfather ate, and epigenetics, and where your genetic information came from in the world. If you're Scandinavian or North African or whatever, that it's all tied up with that. I think, there's some validity to all of those ideas. One thing I think that's probably not as widely talked about, in my view, men and women
Mm.
don't really have the same requirements. I mean, if you just look at the fact that our natural testosterone level is 10 times that of a woman, and certain diets support good testosterone levels and certain ones don't. And to me, it's my opinion, 80-10-10 does not really support good testosterone. Ketogenic does. So
Right.
I went ketogenic, and I like the results. My energy is good, my muscle mass is good. I mean, 70 years old and maintaining this kind of muscle mass and lean body ratio. I think it's largely from the ketogenic switch.
Absolutely. Well, I've had great results with keto myself, and I've used different variations of it. When I first did it, I was doing something, a little closer to Atkins, but now I've greatly modified it. So, I was doing that, and then I did the 80-10-10 for a while, had some of the same problems, hormonal issues, dental issues, all kinds of things.
Right. Dental
Um,
issues I had too.
it was great. It was great to cleanse my system, by the way. It was, I
Yeah.
think as a cleanse, it might work
Yeah.
temporarily, but I am
Yep.
definitely skeptical of it for everyone on the long term. So for me, and again, like you pointed out, sex differences is one thing. There's bio-individuality. I think this is one of the things that the 80-10-10 guys will say, is that there is no such thing as bio-individuality for diet. If you see a particular species out in the wild, they're all going to eat the same thing. That's kind of true, right? But it's also because, you have guys, that are living in a particular area, and they may have optimized for that. If you take the same
Right.
species and put them in a different location, they
They're
may be
going to
eating.
re-optimize. They're going to adjust and re-optimize for that. Yeah.
That's right. We don't know all of the things that are required to understand the different variables for optimization. So we kind of have to test things out on our own body. So for me,
Right.
my keto went from the Atkins style to, I started adding in intermittent fasting. And then I also got very fanatical about ingredient quality. So I was eating protein powders and things like that, because I was misled to the notion that, hey, as long as you get the right macronutrient ratios in, which is stuff like
Right.
the zone guys will tell you, it doesn't
Right.
matter. You can eat the protein powders and this and that, because carbs are carbs and proteins are proteins.
No.
It's total BS.
Yeah.
It's total BS. So I
Yeah.
try to get everything organic or best biodynamic,
Right.
which is it's sort of a step above organic. And for people who have been there's a little bit of brainwashing out there about organics as well. They'll tell you, well, that word organic, it means different things to different people. Well, sure. And there's also a lot of deliberate confusion out there by industry
Right.
players trying to tell you what that word means. I just use it as a shorthand for, with as few additives as possible. I don't want
Exactly.
stuff that's genetically modified. I don't want
Right.
stuff that has chemicals sprayed on it. I want, the most natural food I can get.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. When I was a kid in the late 40s and early 50s, there was no such thing. I mean, there was no organic markets because everything was organic. There
Mm,
was no GMO. It hadn't even, didn't even exist yet. But I agree. Keeping it as clean and pure and simple as possible is a good starting point for sure.
absolutely. And I'll say one real quick thing about GMOs before we go on to another topic. That's another place where there's a lot of misinformation. People will. I heard even Neil deGrasse Tyson said a shocking thing. He said, "Well, we've been genetically modifying our food for centuries." And it's a terrible conflation of information, because
Yeah.
he's talking about Mendelian selective breeding. Okay, that's not the same as what we label as GMOs, genetically modified
Right.
organisms. We're talking about, you know, at the cellular level, injecting DNA from other organisms into a particular plant. That is not Mendelian
Oh,
selective
that's
breeding.
very different. Yeah.
Very, very different thing. So when people say, don't worry about GMOs, we've been doing that for years. I highly question that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So you do keto. Do you do intermittent fasting?
I do, absolutely. My feeding window is like noon to 8. I do not
Noon to
eat
8.
until noon, and then I stop at 8.
So what
So
is it?
16 hours a day, I'm not eating.
Awesome. How many meals do you eat in that 8 hour window?
Within that 8 hours, I'll eat usually 3 times.
Okay. Okay. For me, I'm doing just one meal a day.
Oh, okay.
And that
I
works out.
thought about doing that, going that route too. Sometimes I only eat 2.
Yeah. It works well for me because I think it gives my digestion an even greater break.
Sure.
The trick is you got to make sure that that one meal is not so huge that you blow your gut up.
Exactly.
So
Well,
you
that's
do.
another good thing about keto. You don't feel so deprived because when you get into fat burning,
Mm,
it has a very definite changing effect on your appetite, your feeling, not necessarily your conscious feeling, but it affects your subconscious, your brain's functions in a way that you no longer get that signal from the brain, hey, we need food, because when you're burning fat, it's kind of like the analogy I like to use is if you put uh, newspaper in the fireplace and light it up, it's going to burn real hot, but it's going to be out pretty quick. It's going to be done. Whereas if you put a big fat Yule log in there and light that baby up, it's going to burn at also a very nice, good hot level, but for a long time. Fat is the Yule log, sugar is the newspaper.
that's a beautiful metaphor. And I'll tell you what, I just kind of had a random hypothesis pop into my head while you were saying that. And I noticed as well that I feel so much better on keto. And
Yeah,
definitely, part of that is the, just general satiety. And,
right.
one of the great ways that I've heard this described is that if you are in a carb burning state in your body, then what happens is when you burn that out, then your body has to, it's going to have to kick into fat what metabolism
Uh-huh.
to be able to get that energy. But if you are always in a ketogenic state most of the time, that doesn't take any adaptation time for your body
Right,
to kick into that. Right. So,
right.
right now I haven't had anything to eat today. I feel totally fine. This is early morning my time where I'm recording this
Yeah,
from. Um, if my body needs energy, it's gonna find a fat store. I have a lot fewer of those these days, but there is some there. There is some there. So whenever I need that energy, my body says, "Well, here's some fat. I'm just gonna burn this out." And so people understand this is a totally different way of living. By the way, we're talking about
yeah,
instead of burning carbs and then living off glucose, you have what are called ketone bodies in your
right.
blood, and it's also a more efficient type of energy for your brain as
Your
well.
brain, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Um,
go.
there's a guy you probably are aware of, Mark Sisson.
Oh yeah, I love the guy.
Yeah. He's got something called the keto reset diet, which is like a 21-day reset where he gradually shifts you into what he advocates is getting to, I think, a really good place that he calls. I may not be remembering exactly, but something akin to metabolic versatility. You
Mm,
have the ability to be in fat burning mode, but if there's sugar and for whatever reason, you can shift pretty easily back and forth. Most people are now sugar adapted and have a hard time getting into ketosis. But once you get there, you can start to develop that versatility and be much better off for it. So that's kind of where I'm trying to maintain too, is some versatility, so that if you want to shift up for a couple of days, you can do that and pretty easily get back into ketosis.
yeah, absolutely. I've experienced that as well. In fact, I even went back to 80-10-10 for a week once because I was having some digestive issues, and I knew that would be a nice cleanse
Right.
for my system. So, I
Right.
was eating, mostly watermelon and bananas, for about a week. And then once I felt like my digestion had kind of, calmed down a bit, I went back, and it only took me a day more or less to adapt. I mean, it really, there was no drama at all, but that's because I've been doing this for years. Right.
Right.
So,
I find also that since I've been doing intermittent fasting and keto, for instance, I started the year with a week-long fast.
mm,
Uh, and it was easy because my body was already fat adapted. And it really, I mean, people think about, oh my God, fasting for a week? Are you kidding? It really wasn't much of a challenge.
yeah. And I tell you what, people don't understand, man, fasting is one of the best healing modalities out
Yes.
there. This is, one of the reasons why people do intermittent fasting is that it boosts all of these different processes. For example, the one that people talk about, most is this process of cellular autophagy, right?
Right.
That means,
Right.
the body is constantly killing and rebirthing
Yeah.
cell, and it's killing the cells that are not productive. So if you're getting
Exactly.
intermittent fasting every day, you get, a little bit of that enhanced cellular autophagy, which is one of the most well proven, and well researched mechanisms of anti-aging that we know of,
Absolutely.
if
Yeah.
not the single most.
Yeah. I always thought it was autophagy. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, absolutely.
Maybe, yeah,
And
probably sounds better.
yeah, it helps with your mitochondrial function too. When you get into, sloughing off those cells that are no longer healthy, everything in the system is going to work better, and your mitochondria are going to function better, which is going to affect your energy and your mental focus and your digestion, your muscle building, everything.
Yeah. I want folks to recognize, right here, you and I going back and forth at a pretty fast clip here. I'm 49 now. I think we're about exactly 20 years apart. I'll be turning
Right.
50 this year. You're about to turn 70. We're functioning a lot better than your average teenagers do these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And these kids are putting junk in their bodies, and junk in their minds.
Yes. Yes. Well, again, like I said earlier on in the beginning, the two are so closely linked, and you're going to be much more apt to put good things in your body if you are putting good things in your mind.
100%. 100%. Let's get into that. But I want to just to round this out with diet. Can you tell me what your average meal looks like on a day-to-day basis? So you only have an 8-hour feeding window, and then what do you
Right.
eat?
Okay. I am eating lots of eggs these days.
Mm,
I'll like, for instance, my first meal of the day will often be two hard-boiled eggs, a whole avocado,
mm,
and a bowl of I'll put some macadamias and some pecans, which are both very high fat nuts, but healthy fat.
mm.
And then I'll put some like sauerkraut or kimchi, and also a little bit of goat's milk yogurt. I avoid dairy pretty much most of the time, but I do use a little bit of goat's milk yogurt. Between those two things, between the sauerkraut and the yogurt, I'm getting probiotics. I'm getting lots of healthy fat in there. And then I'll put like a scoop of, am I allowed to plug? I don't have any,
Please do.
I don't have any, deal with the company or anything, but I like Organifi green juice, and I'll just pour a scoop of that on top of that mix with the nuts and the sauerkraut and the yogurt. It sounds like some god awful mess, but it's actually very tasty, and it's incredibly. I feel after this meal along with the two eggs and the healthy fat from the whole avocado, I'm rocking, man. I'm like I'm very satisfied, and I know also mentally that I just put a whole bunch of healthy stuff in my body.
Yeah. People, they hear stuff like that and they don't understand. Two things happen, right? First of all, you start to reprioritize why you're eating food. I mean, I don't care as much about what things taste like. Yeah, I want them to taste nice, right? But I would much rather put something in my body that I know is going to feel good on my gut. I know is going to fuel my
Yeah,
brain. I know is going to fuel my workouts. It's going to
absolutely.
allow me to do all the things that I need to do to feel good about myself. Eating junk, I mean, okay, sure, man, the pizza tastes good, the Oreos taste good, all that stuff, but you feel like crap after you eat
Oh
that
man.
food.
Yeah. And your brain goes into haze mode too. I also, by the way, I like gray Celtic sea salt. I'll
Mm.
use some of that on my hard-boiled eggs. It's good for remineralization and what else? Actually, in the morning, my first thing before I'll, hours before I'll eat, when you first wake up, you ought to hydrate seriously,
Yeah.
big time, get some hydration. And I've actually kind of grown that hydration into kind of a pretty interesting mix. What's in it now is I'll put like a little organic Persian cucumber that I'll blend up. Some again, all these things are organic as much as possible.
Yeah.
Some turmeric, some ground ginger root, some black pepper, some cayenne, some cinnamon, which is not just about flavor; it's actually good for you too.
Yeah.
A bunch
Herbal
of
too.
water, half a lemon, some Celtic sea salt, and I think that's about it. As if that weren't enough. A full juice of one full lemon, which I'll squeeze in there, and a big, at least, probably 16 ounces of water or so, good, pure, filtered water. And that's a great morning hydration. That's a great way to break, well, breakfast. The word breakfast means break fast. That's a great way. But actually, you're not really breaking a fast with that stuff. I don't feel that I've actually I don't consider that a meal. I mean, if you want to, it's a tiny little Persian cucumber. If you want to call that some sort of, if that's going to have some caloric effect, it might be very minimal. But I think that's just a great, really, really healthy way to get your hydration in first thing in the morning.
Yeah, probably not enough to break up the autophagy, autophagy,
Yeah,
however it's pronounced.
right.
The one thing I want to point out to folks is you were talking about the black pepper with the turmeric. There is something in the black pepper, piperine, will make the turmeric more bioavailable. So you're switched on to that. Um,
Exactly.
you mentioned Celtic sea salt. So why? Now I've got my opinions on this. I'm curious about yours. Why do people eat stuff like these ancient salts and things like that? What's
Yeah,
special?
I'm not really sure. Actually, I've heard people say that pink Himalayan salt
Mm,
is the best way to go. And it may actually have more diversity in terms of mineral and trace minerals and things like that in it. But to me, it's got a little bit of a harshness to the taste. My palate has become very sensitive, and I just like the gray Celtic sea salt just has a smoother taste to me. But I think again, that's one of those things that we have been told is raw, is bad, and unhealthy for so long. Too much salt in the diet.
yeah.
Again, I think take it with a grain of salt, uh, and but healthy salt, obviously, not not the iodized stuff that we've been putting on our table back in the 50s anyway. But
Right.
I think it is I think it is a healthy thing. I actually eat more of it probably than a lot of people would consider healthy, but I'm eating anywhere from, I usually eat about 4 eggs a day now, and people would have thought, oh my God, you're gonna have a heart attack. Well, I'm 70. By the way, here's my entire history of medical issues since I've been an adult. I had a headache in 1974. Period. Done. That's it. I don't get sick. I don't get colds. I don't get the flu. I don't get headaches. I don't get anything. And I mean, for a while there, I was married, and my wife and the two boys were getting sick, and one of them would get well, and then give it to the next one, and back again, and around and around and around. And I never got anything from any of them. And I think, it's probably partially genetic. I think, I got to tell you, I think partially it's also because I was a little boy in the late 40s and early 50s, and I was outside playing in the dirt all day.
Mm,
And
mm,
guess what? There's all kinds of healthy stuff in dirt, including B12,
right.
microorganisms, and all that. I was getting dirty every day and outside in the fresh air and in the sunlight every day as a boy. And I think that probably, I was also breastfed, and I think that probably creates a great immune system, as we're supposed to be, right from birth. And kids don't get that anymore.
Yeah. Well, this whole burgeoning science of the microbiome, it was something that was not taken super seriously by the Western medical community for a long time, but now the the evidence is so overwhelming that it cannot be ignored. These soil-based organisms, we're starting to discover some of the things that we need in our system. This is still it's a nascent science. We don't have the full picture yet, but what we do know is that when you're taking antibiotics and you're not getting exposed to the natural organisms that are out there, your immune system will suffer.
Oh man.
And suffer greatly for a lot of people. People are getting these inflammatory diseases, these what do they call that? There's autoimmune diseases. There's a whole slew of these that are happening now, and they seem to be tied, at least very strongly, to the microbiome. Do you take any probiotics other than the kimchis and the stuff like that, or?
No, I used to at times. I used to take acidophilus capsules, but I just rely on the goat milk yogurt and the kimchi kind of thing. By the way, I just wanted to mention, because I just realized people might be wondering what's going on here because I'm kind of moving around. I sit on one of these most of the time.
Nice.
That again keeps me in a situation where my core and all those little muscles all around front, not just the abs, but the front and the back and everything else, hip flexors and everything else are constantly adjusting and moving, and just little things like that. Again, Kaizen, little things. Pay attention to the little things that are going on in your life, because they add up to be really big things. Like if you're not paying attention to them, they'll grow up, they'll turn into really bad big things like cancer or diabetes.
Yeah, absolutely. I stand now instead of sitting anywhere. I used to use a Swiss ball like that, which I think is a great alternative to normal chairs. But standing, it has its pros and cons. It takes a while to adapt to be able to stand all the time. Lucky for you, you're the kind of guy who's moving around a lot with your type of work. For guys who are in front of a computer all day, it can be quite the challenge. I believe it is definitely worth the effort to get in there and do some of the alternative ways of working rather than sitting at a normal desk. It causes so many problems throughout the body.
By the way, I just want to insert something real quick. I saw a hangout you did, I don't know, it was probably a year ago, with the 3 Fuel guy.
3 Fuel.
3 Fuel. It's the pre and post workout powder, like protein powder.
I don't know. I know who the guy is apparently, but I'm not familiar with the product.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure he's here in the LA area too. Anyway, he mentioned one thing that really resonated with me, because one thing I've noticed that I have to be careful of, and again, the idea of being able to say, "Oops, I was wrong. I made a mistake." I noticed that as I get younger, as the years go by, I was going to say age, but I guess I am in some kind of way.
Younger. Go with it.
I have to be conscious of posture. This is one way that helps, actually, because I'm constantly realigning things. But he mentioned one thing on there about spinal alignment, because it's especially for guys, if you're standing kind of in a sway back, you tend to get into this thing where your hips ride back and your belly sticks out.
Yep.
But he said that the way to get your pelvic and spinal alignment and all correct is when you're standing, you just very slightly tighten your abs and your glutes, both of them.
I know who you're talking about.
That will align your pelvis where it needs to be. A lot of guys get into this thing where they get this pelvic tilt going, and kind of like a horse, a sway back thing. And it makes you look like you got a gut, even if you don't. But just slightly, very slightly tightening both your abs and your glutes, you will have the proper spinal alignment. So just wanted to throw that in there. It was a great thing I got from that hangout you did with that guy.
I remember. Yeah, I can't remember his name. I should. Oh man, great guy, by the way. That was one of the best little bits of advice there, because I mean, look, posture and alignment, mobility, all this stuff is subtle, and there are all sorts of different layers of nuance. But that was one of the best high impact, minimal effort bits of advice I have seen out there. Just engaging your core and squeezing your glutes does have this tremendously wonderful effect of putting things in at least the general right direction, or
Yeah.
a better direction than they are without that. I'm
Yep.
I'm constantly working on stuff like that, because I want to push myself to, athletic heights. And I
Yeah.
know that if I'm not moving correctly, it's going to be very hard, if not impossible, because the body's it's going to get caught up in the wrong way, and you're going to get an impingement somewhere. It's going to be so
Right.
painful, you're not going to be able to move.
Right.
But if you start to move correctly, you'll find that you don't need a lot of chiropractic. You don't need a lot of painkillers. You're
Yep.
just the body knows how to repair itself, but it has to be moving correctly.
Yes, absolutely. Very crucial. And I mean, I remember going back to when I was a little guy. I got into baseball real heavily when I was like 8, and I played in at least 2 leagues every year from age 8 through age 18, which through those formative years of growth, that affected my body shape, my body proportions, playing baseball, because you're doing a lot of twisting motions. Throwing, especially, you're doing a lot of twisting motions, and batting, you're doing twisting motions. So it's not just straight in line kind of stuff. But I learned, because I was small. I'm like 5'8",
Mm.
uh, not real big, but and I was always one of the smaller guys on the team. But I learned I had a bazooka arm because I learned to throw from my legs. And again, that's an expression of what you're talking about. Little things, little body adjustments, and little things that you can learn to do to make your movements much more efficient, much more effective, and much less prone to injury.
Yeah. And thankfully, because you're doing a lot of body weight stuff, it's going to push your body in that right
Yes.
direction. Hey, to close out diet, I want to find out, are you eating a lot of, so like in your later meals, are you adding in greens and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
I love arugula. I eat
Yeah.
arugula. I put arugula. I do have uh, um, pretty often, actually, and I need to be careful about it, because if I do it too much, it'll knock me out of ketosis. I do a smoothie with some berries in it, not fruit. I don't do any fruit anymore. There's too much sugar in it. But berries have less sugar and a
Mm.
lot of really important nutrients. And I'll do a smoothie with some berries in, and a pretty good amount of arugula, and some coconut milk, and a little bit of dark chocolate, things like that. And so, yeah, I am getting fiber in there as well, for sure.
Okay. And so the dark chocolate, you're using like a natural organic source without any added
Absolutely,
sugar, that kind of
of
thing. Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
And
Beautiful.
I also like to steam vegetables. I mean,
Mm.
cauliflower and broccoli and asparagus, or just steam them up and put some grass-fed butter on top, and
Yep.
some gray Celtic sea salt, and it's delicious. And you can eat as much of it as you want.
Yeah. Oh, now that's interesting. See, I don't count my calories either. I
I
just
don't
kind
eat.
of, I do it all by sight. Now, if I'm
Yeah,
really trying to shred, I mean, right now my body fat's pretty low. I'm pretty good. But if I want to like get my abs like really, tight, then okay, then I might get a little more precise about that stuff. But
right,
man, I
right.
do just fine without even thinking about it. So,
Yeah.
you said grass-fed butter. So do you have any thoughts on that? I have some interesting information about why that's so superior to the stuff that you would buy in the normal store. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, again, I try to get when I try to get, avoid, what are they, like salmon that's grown in farm grown or
Yep.
whatever it is. Get wild caught
Yep.
salmon, grass fed beef. Animals are not supposed to be eating grains. It is not their
That's right.
natural diet, and
That's
that
right.
has destroyed the quality of the meat that you get in the grocery store.
Yep.
Unless you go somewhere and get meat from cattle that has been grass fed, which is, I mean, think about it. When you change your diet, it messes with your health. If you change the diet of the animals that are your meat source, it's going to mess with their health too. And it has drastically skewed the omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acid ratios
Exactly.
in the meat, and various other aspects. They're not supposed to be eating grains any more than we are. I mean, grains were never even a part of the human diet until 10,000 years ago. And they're telling us that should be the foundation. What are you talking about? How can that be? It doesn't make any sense scientifically or evolutionarily, or if that's a word.
Well, this is another area where there's so much misinformation.
Yeah.
People saying, fats are fats, proteins are proteins. Don't
No.
worry about grass fed. It doesn't make any. There was one guy, he was actually even a nutritional scientist, a PhD guy. I saw him on Facebook browbeating people. That's just such garbage misinformation. You guys are non-scientists. And I said very politely, I said, well, sir, if you go to PubMed, you can find out that there have been studies conducted where if you look at the fatty acid quality of cows that have been fed grass as opposed to grains, there is a clear difference in the omega-369 ratios. This is super well documented. And we know that the impact on the human body based on the concentration of these ratios is radically different as well.
He was probably a big farming troll or something,
I gotta suspect, man, because I think, what kind of scientist are you if you can't even look in a journal? You're gonna brown people. To me, science is about, hey, let's all discover the truth together. Let's discuss it passionately. Let us find the truth so we can all be better. It's morphed into something really strange. But the really interesting thing is that these effects are extremely well observed, right? And if people get this information that, hey, cholesterol is bad, well, okay, when you say cholesterol, what are you talking about? First of all, there are different types of cholesterol, and if you're getting the cholesterol from fat source A versus fat source B, the impact on the body is going to be totally different. So this is, like you said in the very beginning, we've got to be kind of relaxed about being wrong about things, because we're going to be wrong a lot more. 10 years from now, you and I will have the same conversation. We'll probably have discovered more nuance that has allowed us to optimize even further.
Absolutely. I plan on it. Did you say 10, 20 years? Yeah, I'll be 90, you'll be 70, you'll be my age now. And I plan to go deep into three figures. In fact, we haven't even really touched on that. And my mom just passed at age 97 2 years ago. And I'm like a genetic clone of her. So I've got a good shot at that. But again, among the many things that I research constantly, in addition to diet and exercise and various exercise modalities like Tabata and all that kind of stuff, is another thing that I'm seriously looking into is the whole anti-aging or pro-youthing, whatever you want to call it, that whole movement that is going on. And there are things going on there that 99% of the world has no idea about. And the fact is that the people on the cutting edge of all of that science now say that essentially within 20 years or so, unlimited lifespans with the physical capacities of a 25-year-old will be happening.
That's right.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
Well, they're doing so many things now with, lengthening of the telomeres and, all of this, the stem cell technology that's coming out now. It's so promising. So if people feel like maybe there's no motivation, hey, we're all going to die anyway. Actually, we're kind of at a unique period in history right now. If you can hold out for just maybe 10, 20, 30 years more, you might get to a point where aging is no longer an issue for you.
Well, Ray Kurzweil co-wrote a book with a doctor. I forget the doctor's name offhand, but the book is called Live Long Enough to Live Forever. And the premise is exactly what you just said. If you can, through the natural means available to us now with diet and exercise and healthy living, if you can extend your life for another 20, 30 years or so, you're golden.
100%. So, I mean, if that's not enough motivation right there, wherever you are spiritually, wouldn't you want to live, more optimally than you are now for a lot longer? Of course.
Absolutely. Of course. I mean, I'll go, if that was available now, I mean, I'm thinking, okay, get back to all the things I could do, physically and in every capacity when I was in my 20s and 30s. Okay, I'll go play shortstop for the Yankees for 100 years. And then for the next 100 years, I'll go sing with the Metropolitan Opera. And then for the next 100 years, something else. I don't know.
That's cool, man. That's a great thing. And you could do it too. All right. So let's, so how about, so stress and recovery? I know you mentioned transcendental meditation for a while there.
Yeah.
You still do that?
Absolutely. Every day.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you find that's better. That's better for you than, like, say, I use a lot of this binaural. You probably, have less respect for
I've
that, having
tried
gone
many
through.
of those, and there are some of them that I really like. I think you mentioned Brain EV. I think that's
Yeah.
a good one. And there's some others. There's a friend of mine up in Toronto area named Mari Zelkovich that has created some things like that too. I think his are better than the binaural beats. There's a different technology involved, and I don't want to get lost in that conversation because you and I could have some big fun with the technology, but everybody else would get bored.
Right.
But actually, and I've experimented with those things, but in the last probably year or so, I've kind of gone back to just old school natural TM and no assisted devices.
Okay. All right. I want to ask you some personal stuff now. We're gonna, and
Yeah.
if any of this gets too deep, we can edit it out, right? So, all right. So you're in the rock and roll industry, right? Um, and what goes along with rock and roll all the time is sex and drugs, right? So you were in a situation where you had a lot of drug temptation,
Yeah.
and you seem to have done very well with that. Now, do you distinguish between things like, certain, there are drugs and there are drugs. Some people are using entheogens, and marijuana now is
Right.
being used
Right.
medicinally. What are your feelings on all that?
Well, I have no qualms about acknowledging that I experimented with some things in my youth.
Mm,
Uh, I recognized very quickly that it was, in my opinion, not a road to any kind of great creativity
yeah.
or tapping into resources that would otherwise be unavailable. In fact, I realized that it was quite the opposite.
Mm,
Especially not just for myself, but especially as I saw what was happening to some of the people around me that were really getting lost in it. And I developed a reputation pretty early on for being the health nut in the band when everybody else was out partying and going crazy. And I wasn't going there. I attribute it to a couple of things. I think. Uh, Boy, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, but I've been a student of philosophy for a long time,
mm.
and uh, I think that's probably part of it. I am not religious, but I am very, very interested in ethics and morality from my studies of philosophy.
Right.
And I just kind of got I'm also heavily classically trained. My background is in classical music. I went to the Curtis Institute in Philadelphia, which is harder to get into than Harvard or Yale. Harvard and Yale, 95% of the applicants do not get in. They only accept 5%.
Mm,
Curtis is between 3 and 4. So it's the one of the most exclusive places to get into. And when you get to that level of, the students that you're with and the teachers that you're with, I mean, we're talking about some of the most uh, profoundly disciplined people, but in an easy and natural way, just because how the heck could you do it otherwise? And with Zappa, how the heck could you do it otherwise? Before I went out on tour with Zappa, I remember we all signed a release form saying that we understood if anybody was caught under the influence of drugs or alcohol before or during a performance, you're on the next plane home. You're out of there. You're gone.
wow.
The only question is, will that be a window or an aisle? And but that was easy for me because I had gone through the whole Curtis situation where every day I'm working with these magnificent human beings who have developed such a world-class level of excellence in what they do that it kind of rubbed off, and so I was I think I had a good foundation before I even got into that other world. And it really wasn't hard for me to resist that temptation. I know, in fact, I've been kind of surprised actually recently to find some of these guys that are the current gurus of health and all. They're talking about micro dosing with various things.
Yeah.
and actually getting some scientifically backed good results out of it. And I'm saying, oh, well, okay, that's fine. This doesn't make me want to do it,
Right.
but I'd much rather really go on my own steam and just maximize what I get from my own thought processes and good input mentally and good input nutritionally.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that there are certainly some therapeutic uses of marijuana and certain
Yeah,
entheogens. You know, there people are
yeah,
talking about using, psilocybin mushrooms now to treat depression, getting very
right,
very good results with that kind
yeah,
of thing. But we're not doing these things recreationally. You know, it's not like
right,
go eat a couple grams of mushrooms and go party. You know, this is in a
yeah,
therapeutic context where
right,
they're taking you through a particular process because the people who are really deep into that, they talk about set and setting. So you're going to get a very, very different result,
right.
in set and setting A versus set and setting B.
Exactly. It's
But I
not just setting. I think it's mental setting too. It's
absolutely,
intent, mental intent. That's motivation.
I would have to think so. I mean, goodness, when you're doing something that profound, it would have to have a tremendous effect. Okay, so what about this is the more taboo topic of sex. How important do you feel that is in relation to your overall health regime?
I think it is. I think it's probably misunderstood,
Mm,
especially now in today's world. I'm kind of dismayed at something that I see going on, which is a lot of young people, especially young males, getting addicted to pornography
mm,
because it's so readily available on the internet, and it has totally destroyed their capacity to actually relate to another human being sexually on a real, authentic level. It's destroyed their capabilities as lovers as well. I mean, without getting totally into it graphically, it will not make you a good lover. It will make you exactly the opposite when all you do is do the porn thing and get your release that way. I think again it's an interesting subject because as I'm sure you know, there are centuries, in fact millennia of traditions where very highly spiritual people saw it as a means to spiritual ends as well. And I can definitely understand that. I've certainly had some experiences where it was pretty damn profound beyond just the physical sensations that were going on. I think it's entirely natural. Obviously, you need to be, especially in this day and age. I mean, when I came of age, it was prior to the existence of AIDS. So it was a very different world.
yeah.
And you have to be really, really careful about um, so many things because of those realities in today's world. The disease factor. I mean, it used to be, make love not war, and it turned into, make love and die from some
Right.
disease. It was a
There's the
pretty
80s. There's the 80s in one sentence.
yeah yeah. Yeah.
Oh my
But
goodness.
I think I think it's totally natural and totally healthy, or at least it can be. But again, like everything else we're talking about here, mindset, intent, understanding,
Mm,
the ability to be compassionate and empathic and relate with people is a huge part that we're talking about now when you get into that realm. So there's a lot. It's really really deep and wide and multifaceted thing.
absolutely. Did you ever get into any tantric practices or anything like that?
Yeah,
And for people who are squeamish, you might want to turn off now because I'm gonna get a little graphic here about it. But I mean, what we're talking about here is preventing yourself from ejaculating,
yeah,
and
exactly.
that doesn't mean not having an orgasm, right?
Right,
Um,
exactly. The
and
two are not don't have to be simultaneous.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. And there's some surprising sources that talk about this. If you look at the great Napoleon Hill in the book Think and Grow Rich, there's even
Right.
a chapter in there about what he called sex transmutation. And there's so
Right.
many millions of people who have read that book, but nobody talks about that aspect of it.
Right. Right.
And he's talking about conserving that energy, and
Yes.
the Taoist tantric guys are, they'll have multiple, this is a man who would have multiple orgasms without ejaculation. And what they say is that gives you a tremendous amount of power. So you have experimented with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
What kind of results do you get?
I think it's all true. I think the idea that conserving that power is a positive thing. I think that it's yet another thing you can do to improve your character and your capacity for discipline and self-knowledge.
Yep.
Is to study and learn and practice those kinds of skills.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so and it's, again, if we're getting too, but I want to know so many details when somebody is at your level of fitness at your age, man, I want to know the nitty gritty, because there's stuff going on there that's outside of the norm, and I want to kind of uncover that. So these days now, I mean, are you still practicing that, or
Yes.
you are?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
how often would you allow yourself to ejaculate?
Once a week.
Once a week. Okay.
Yeah.
So the Taoist guys, they have some formula where it's like something like your age minus something, and that's how many
Right, I
days.
know. There's all kinds of different ideas about that.
Yeah.
And different opinions, and depending on who you read and who you believe. And I mean, of course, in the medical world, they have different ideas about it as well. And there's an interesting thing also, that there are people who, like you and I, bridge a lot of different areas of knowledge and self-knowledge and self-growth and all that. There are people in the world of Western medicine and Eastern medicine that recognize, hey, there's good things about the Western medicine and there's good things about the Eastern medicine. It's ridiculous and crazy to dismiss one or the other entirely. Let's get the best out of both of them. I mean, if you got a broken arm or a big gash in yourself, you need Western medicine. You need stitches. You can meditate on that all you want, but you better get it sewn up and closed up.
Yeah, for trauma care, Western medicine cannot be beat. It's hands down.
Yeah, but again, they don't. As you noted earlier, as part of the training for Western medicine, nutrition is pretty much ignored. They don't have a clue. We know more about nutrition than a PhD MD trained in Western medicine.
Shocking to me. To me, this is essential. Like, how can you talk about health without talking about what you're putting in your body? I don't get that.
Yeah, as if the two were mutually exclusive. Of course,
Right.
they're.
Wow. Yeah. How could they not be related? All right. So thank you for opening up about that, man, because that's, a lot of people would be squeamish about talking about it. But I think it matters, because when you're in a situation where you're allowing yourself to have a longer period of time in an ecstatic state, naturally, that can't help but lower your cortisol,
Yes.
I mean, it's
Yes. And elevate your spirituality, and again, enhance it enhances your self-esteem, because you've gained a new level of self-control and self-discipline, and I mean, it's just so many good things in a positive snowball that enhance each other.
Yeah. That, man, it's such a great topic. Let's move on to some other. I know there are probably a few things that we haven't touched on yet that you would like to. If you could think of what we haven't covered yet.
Right.
People are asking, what are the secrets? Okay, I've learned a lot of information here. What else are there any other practices, things that you do that folks might be able to benefit from?
I'm not thinking anything right off the top of my head, but what did come to mind that I just want to mention really quickly is that for me, this whole world of health and fitness and all that is not an end in itself. It's essentially a means to an end. I want to be healthy and strong and disciplined and all that, so that I can be the most badass musician that I can possibly be. And so that's a crucial aspect of it for me. It's not just because, I want to look great, or I want to be, never get sick or whatever. It's, for me, it's to make my passion in life be that much more available to me over a longer period of time, available to me at a greater depth and a greater intensity and a greater level of excellence. And so it's a means to an end for me. As far as more techniques or secrets or inside stuff, boy, I'm not sure if you got any more notes that might trigger something.
Well, here's something. This is so the great Paul Chek. I don't know if you saw the conversation I had with him, but man, he's one of these guys. He's like up there on your level. He's one of the most wonderfully self-actualized guys, and his depth of knowledge about health is not exceeded by anyone I've ever met, because
Right.
he takes his information from as many different sources as he can, and like
Perfect.
you, he can demonstrate all this stuff. This is a guy who can take a 150-pound dumbbell and pop it over his head single arm. I mean, that is not an easy task.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a small man too. I think he's like 5'6", but he has this model that he calls the four doctors: Dr. Diet, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Happiness. And he says that the overarching doctor is Dr. Happiness. So I'm hypothesizing that part of your success is because you're such a badass musician. And by the way, guys, musicians don't get more badass than Robert Martin. He's reached that level where there's like a handful of people in history who reached that level. I think that great accomplishment is probably one of the greatest triggers of happiness, and that has to factor in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You just hit a really, really massive nail right on the head. That is a very, very big factor. And again, that is the thing as far as the four doctors. Yeah. The other three contribute to Dr. Happiness for sure. Mm-hmm. So I would agree with Chek there that the overarching principle comes from the resources that Dr. Happiness gains from Dr. Diet and the other three.
Yeah. So let's imagine. I'm going to put myself in the head of the listener here, because I know I think a lot, pretty much every day, about what Simpleology users are thinking and feeling, what kind of help they need, and I'm guessing, being in tune with these guys, that there are people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s who are looking at this going, well, that's easy for you to say, Robert Martin. You did that from when you were a young kid. What about me? I'm 40, 50, 60 now. I don't have the time to reach that level of achievement. I got a couple answers to that, but I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I would say, so what? That's the starting point. So Boom. What? If you want to, Grandma Moses didn't pick up a paintbrush until she was like 82, I think it was, or something like that.
Yes, sir.
There is just no reason to not start. It doesn't matter. I mean, if you know you're going to die tomorrow, then so what? Go ahead and see if you can become better between now and that moment when you die. And that is a driving force for me in every aspect of life. In fact, one thing that we haven't really talked about is the whole idea of, speaking of feeding your mind, is motivation and affirmations, which a lot of people, I think, misunderstand and do wrong and don't get any benefit from, and therefore dismiss. But I do have a series of things that I feed my mind every morning and every night, first thing when I wake up and last thing before I go to bed. And they are, I think, important aspects of keeping this mindset that I have, that allows me to maintain youthfulness in my physicality and my skills as much as possible, but also in my mindset and a never say die, keep going. Frank Zappa, he's very famous for saying, I guess you could call it two rules. Rule number one is keep going. Rule number two is don't stop.
I love it.
Might have backwards. I'm not sure. It might have been don't stop and keep going. But I mean, if you live your life based on that, okay, so what? You might not. Everybody is not going to get. I had to deal with this. Now, this does bring up an interesting thing, because when I was a little kid, I for whatever reason, I just had natural things going on where in elementary school, I was the fastest runner, the smartest at math, the best in art, the best in English. I got the highest grades. I was the best athlete, the best musician. And then when I got to junior high school, I ran into kids that started to specialize. And I was no longer the Muhammad Ali of every aspect of life. And it it burned me up. It made me crazy. But I learned at that age, around 11 or 12, that okay, I'm not going to be the best at everything for the entire rest of my life, and I have to get with that. So whoever was you were talking about, if somebody was saying, okay, well, I don't have the time, I'm 40, I'd love to be a master musician, but you know, it's too late. Again, I would say, so what? Start from that place. Start from so what? So what if you're 40? So do and apply yourself and make yourself the best that you can be. Arthur Ashe, tennis player. You wouldn't think, but I have to say he came up with one of the best expressions of the best way to live in a short, a short philosophical expression in just a few sentences. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.
Yeah.
3 sentences, very short, simple sentences that are such an incredible set of rules for life. I mean, think about that. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And that, for that guy that's 40 years old and says, well, it's too late for me. No. Okay, you're 40. Start there. You don't have the skills. Okay, use what you got. Well, you know, I need this and that. Well, do what you can. Do what you can with what you got where you are.
That's such a profound way of looking at the world. I want to loop back here in a minute to what you were saying about affirmations, but first I just want to comment on that a little bit. You know, I saw a guy recently in the gym where I am right now, and he started out with this, you know, kind of big, round, doughy face. And and I could tell he was struggling, and he was using one of the same trainers I use. And I would talk with the guy, kind of encourage him a little bit. And I'd drop little, seeds into his mind to kind of reprogram him every chance, just casually. I'm just talking with you. He doesn't know that, like, I'm doing things to his mind, trying to help. Exactly. But I tell you what, in just a few months, the guy's face looks totally different, and now his energy levels are different. I mean, he's absolutely transformed in just a period of a few months. So what I want people to know is, look, and Robert has basically said everything already that I'm about to say, but I want to say it in different words. And that's, disengage the ego. It doesn't matter. You're not competing with somebody else. I mean, maybe you are, but the ultimate competition truly is with you, because you're going to get the satisfaction by knowing you did your best, right? This is, Don Miguel Ruiz in the 4 Agreements. One of them is always do your best. Right. There's some profound wisdom in that, because when you go to sleep at night, knowing that you've done your best, you feel different. And you can see results. You talked about Grandma Moses. There was a gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he wrote his first book at 90. He thought about it his whole life, finally did it and published it and was extremely successful. There are no rules, but even if you don't achieve a particular result, when you know that you're just doing it on a day-to-day basis, there is a certain amount of pride that comes from, hey man, I know that every day I show up and I go to the gym and I can see those results. This to me is what faith is about, right? It's a faith, knowing that what you're doing is going to have an impact over time. It's not faith that some, God is going to come out of the sky and Deus Ex Machina, wave his magic wand and make all your problems go away. No, it's faith that there is a system in which we live. And if you live by the rules of that system, and it seems to be very tied into doing things consistently over time, that you are going to get a result, and you will see it. You will see it.
Yeah. I think it kind of ties in with some other interesting things in terms of philosophy as well. Ayn Rand talked about, I think she called it the benevolent universe idea. That if you do, as you just said, and again, as Ben Franklin observed, nature to be commanded must be obeyed. If you follow the rules of nature and act Kaizen, little things every day, according to those rules, you will get good results. The universe is not going to smack you down because it's nasty in some way. You
Yeah.
will get positive results from positive actions, just like you'll get negative results from negative actions. If you sit on the couch and eat potato chips and watch TV, your life will reflect those bad actions. And if you feed yourself well, exercise every day, feed your mind good stuff, you will get appropriate to the level that you put in. You'll get out of it what you put in. It also triggered something you said about ego. And pride. When I got my black belt in Taekwondo, which I got when I was 54, way back, 16 years ago.
Nice.
We had to do an essay, and one of the things that I wrote in the essay was about the idea that there's a mistaken concept about pride and ego that an awful lot of people have, because we've been, again, inculcated with all these things for centuries from all kinds of different sources. Some of them sources of good things, some of them sources of bad. Religion, for one thing, I will not hesitate to say, is a source of some good ideas and a source of some bad ideas and some bad things in history as well. And one of the things that we get from various places is the idea that that pride is bad, that ego is bad. Aristotle, 2,500 years ago, before Christ was born, identified pride as the crown of all virtues. The crown, not something bad, but something good, and not only something good, but the crown of all of them, because he correctly identified that you work for and earn pride by
Yes.
first practicing all the other virtues. Independence, honesty, integrity, all those other things. And when you practice those, you will create a life that you can be rightfully proud of, and you should be proud of it. And I wrote about that in my black belt essay, saying that there's a common misconception. People say things like "leave your ego at the door." No, no.
Yeah.
I think that ego is equally as misunderstood as pride, because somebody that is loud and boastful and all that kind of stuff, they don't have a big ego, they have a small ego. And they have to do that kind of stuff because they need to have their small ego stroked in order to make up for the fact that it's small. A person with a really strong, solid sense of self and a good ego is not loud and boastful and overbearing like that. They're quiet, they're reserved, they're naturally humble in a way, but not, to me, humility can have a bad connotation, actually. Their ego is strong and solid, and therefore quiet, and not, that they have to impose themselves on anybody else and brag and boast and all that kind of nonsense. That is a good, well-developed ego, not the other way around. So I think there are a lot of misconceptions about both pride and ego.
Yeah, there are some beautiful distinctions there, and I think that people use these terms in different ways, and there are a lot of misunderstandings. So, when people talk about, for example, the term ego strength in psychotherapy is a very positive term, and I think when people use it negatively, generally, at least the way I see it, is that, I agree with everything that you just said. When we talk about the ego being an unhealthy thing, it's talking about the kind of reactions you were talking about, having a negative reaction to something, taking things personally, and instead of, looking at someone who did something better than you and saying, okay, what, I would like to do it better myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for them, right? Good for them, and it's also good for me because I got to learn from that. But what a lot of people do is they deny that they're not there. It's like, well, I'm like that too. Well, that's what we would call an ego problem there. If you're deceiving yourself, right? But if you're saying, okay, man, I take that as a little bit of nudge. I want to be like that. It's going to give me a little bit more energy. To me, that's super healthy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
And I mentioned also that in the process of learning, going from a white belt to a black belt, those years of work and effort and study, I was inspired by a lot of people that may have been, by the time I got to the upper belts, lower belts than me, but I watched them work their butts off and struggle with something that they could not do, and finally get to where, wow, they finally did it. And then they got better and better and better and did it better and better and better. And then they were able to teach somebody else. And I was inspired by that. My inspiration was not their goal by any means. Their own improvement was their goal.
Yep.
My inspiration that I received from observing that was a silent gift that they didn't even know they were giving me.
Yeah. That's right. To me, the best way to help other people is to help yourself. Be the best
Absolutely. Be the
example.
best you can be. That's what the world needs, is more of people being the best they can be.
Right. And if everybody were doing that, we'd have a lot fewer problems. That's for damn sure.
Darn right about
Yep.
that.
So affirmations. Now you were saying that there are
Yeah.
affirmations you use and that people misunderstand that. So what would you say is the right way to use affirmations?
Okay. Actually, in my Look Great Naked at Any Age system that I created, the first module is mindset and motivation, and in there I talk about affirmations and the fact that they are formulated badly and actually detrimental if they're not used properly.
Mm,
One of the things in particular that is often taught is that you need to say it in the present tense as if you've already achieved it. Well, again, you got to be careful about that, because if you do it incorrectly, you're going to create what's called cognitive dissonance, which
yep.
will create nothing but problems. For instance, if you weigh 200 and you know that your ideal weight is 160, and you feed yourself this quote unquote affirmation that I'm so happy and proud that I weigh 160 pounds. And you know that you were on the scale earlier that day, and your eyes and your brain saw 200 pounds. So now what you've done is you've tried to tell your mind something that it knows is a lie. You're
Mm,
lying to yourself. That is not a good thing to do. And it
yeah.
is certainly not going to improve your chances of getting to the point where you want to actually get to that weight. So what I suggested people do, and still suggest that they do, is don't put it in the present tense. Don't do it in such a way that it creates cognitive dissonance. But there's an important distinction that you add on to the sentence. For instance, if your goal is, okay, I weigh 200 pounds. That's way too much. I ought to be weighing 160. So you set yourself a goal. Okay, by September 1st, I will weigh 160 pounds. I will. Now they tell you, don't put it in the future. Your mind doesn't understand. Your subconscious doesn't get the distinction between time zones and all that kind of stuff. Future, past, present. So you got to do it in the present. I disagree. I say, do it in such a way, say, I will weigh 160 pounds by September 1st. And here's the important part. You have to add, after that comma, you have to add, and I take action every day that moves me towards my goal.
Mm,
If you word the affirmation in that way, if you say I will, which is a lot more emphatic than I'm happy and proud that I weigh 160 pounds. Well, you don't, you're lying, and it's not going to really work. Say I will weigh 160 pounds by September 1st, and I take action every day that moves me towards my goal. And if you're doing that, you're doing, again, your principle that's so beautifully shared with us in the Kaizen idea in Simpleology. You're doing Kaizen every day. You're taking action and reminding yourself, and I take action every day that moves me towards my goals. Now you got something that's going to work.
nice. One thing I also observed there is you're using some passion and feeling in there. And to me,
Yes.
the
Oh yeah,
emotion the emotion behind your communication to yourself and to other people. I think
crucial.
Tony Robbins was once saying, it was like, hey, I see the message as the nail, and then the emotion is the hammer, right? You
Right.
know, you
Okay.
can
That's
there.
good.
It's an interesting metaphor, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I know you were saying I will. You're tapping into that strength. I listen to these CT Fletcher audios sometimes. He's one of these just great bodybuilders, and just the passion in his voice gets me pumped up for whatever I want to do. You can
Right.
generate energy out of nothing just by harnessing that passion in the tonality of your voice.
Yeah. Yeah. When you combine something that you really fiercely want with the emotional component, when you get the intellectual information and combine the emotion with it, then you got something that is so much more powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are some of the affirmations that you use? I don't know if you want to share the actual ones, but anything you could share there. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
well, the very first thing I'll share, I'll tell you what, I'll share you the very first thing I start with when as soon as I do use an alarm. A lot of people say, well, you shouldn't do that. You should train yourself to wake up at, yeah, you can do that. And I've done that, but I do use an alarm. And as soon as that thing goes off, the first thing that I do is, even, before I even open my eyes, is I say, I am grateful for another day filled with opportunities for success.
Mm,
And that statement right there, first of all, you're starting your day from a place of gratitude, which is a great place to start.
yep.
And you're acknowledging a truth that this day is filled with opportunities for success. You just need to take the actions that are going to access the things within yourself and the things within your circumstances that are going to lead to those successes. So I am grateful for another day filled with opportunities for success. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things that I do in there too, but I also, and I do this whole list again at night, and I even start with that one at night, except I changed it. I add one little thing. I say, I am grateful for another day filled with opportunities for success made real. And
Mm,
after I say success made real, I will think of 5 good things that happened during that day, whether or not I made them happen, or they just happened, or something that I enjoyed, or something that I accomplished, or something that I did that I had really been wanting to do, or some interaction with someone that gave me something to look back on with pleasure or satisfaction. And that's another, starting your day with gratitude and then finishing your day by acknowledging with gratitude those 5 good things that happened right before you go to bed. That's another great thing to feed your mind, so that your subconscious never goes to sleep, which is pretty bizarre when you think about it. I mean, our conscious mind needs that 8-hour sleep cycle, but part of our existence is alive and kicking nonstop from birth to death. It never shuts down and never goes to sleep. Your subconscious is in the playground when you're having dreams. That's what's going on there, and that is an important part of your renewal and your refreshing psychologically and physically that you need, is that subconscious playground that happens when the conscious mind goes, the gatekeeper shuts down and goes to sleep. And if you start your day by kind of waking up both of those systems, the conscious and the subconscious, with something that puts you in a place of gratitude and openness to possibilities, like, I am grateful for another day filled with opportunities for success. And if you end your day in a similar way, adding to it success made real, possibility of success made real, and then recite what those things made real are, you've just done yourself a wonderful service and set your mind up, your subconscious mind, for when it goes out there on that wild playground to be happy about things and feed on things, and maybe give you some good ideas how to continue that and make it grow tomorrow and be better tomorrow.
If the subconscious mind is constantly active and is constantly driving behavior for us on a day-to-day basis when we're not even thinking about it, shouldn't we be feeding the subconscious mind some stuff that's going to set us up for success? It seems
Oh
pretty
my
important to me.
Oh my goodness, you're darn tootin'. That is hugely, hugely important. And so many people don't even have any idea that that's a good idea, let alone do it.
Yeah, that's right. Do you ever get disappointed or upset or or angry?
Very, very little. Not certainly like I used to when I was a kid, like we all
Yeah.
do when we get what we wanted for Christmas or whatever. But no, I mean, if something didn't happen the way I would have preferred, I do my best to put it in the perspective of, okay, well, this is something I can strive for to improve tomorrow.
Beautiful stuff. Where would you like folks to go to find out more about you? I would just tell people, listen, whatever comes out of Robert's mouth right now, listen, because
Okay,
it probably two places. Let's hear.
Places. The first one is mostly in line with what we were talking about in terms of physical health and all that. And that website is called, and if you're, is this going to be available for replay by any chance or something?
It certainly will. Absolutely will.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So that if you don't get this right away, right off the bat, you can go back and repeat it. But the website is called, it's not that hard to remember, lookgreatnakedatanyage.com.
I love it.
Okay. Lookgreatnakedatanyage.com. That's the website where the system that I use to keep myself, to build what I've got here and keep it going at 70 years of age is available to you. And again, I wanted to make this thing an encyclopedia. I didn't want to cut it up into, okay, here's your cardio, buy that. Here's your strength work. You can get that separately. And here's your motivation and mindset. That's another module separate from all the others. Here's your nutrition. I wanted to make it just one big encyclopedia that you can have everything that you need in one place. And that's what you can get there on lookgreatnakedatanyage.com. And there's some pretty wild videos on there. I got to say, go on the site if for nothing else, but just to watch these videos of an old codger doing a handstand dead solid for 30 seconds and talking to you while he's upside down. And awesome. Then doing like handstand push-ups, and then doing I use, by the way, this device right here is one piece of equipment that I actually do use. When I first started doing these in hotel room workouts, when I was out on these tours like 40 years ago, 1978, when I turned 30, I was on tour with the Rolling Stones on their U.S. I was playing with Etta James, and we were the opening act for the Rolling Stones. Wow. Back then, these things didn't exist, but they did have a tiny little wheel that you could just put your hands on. But now that they've got these things that you can put your feet in, it's a whole different thing. But there's videos on the website there where now most people they'll take this thing and you get down on your hands and knees, and from your knees you roll out and then you roll back, and it's great for your abs. What I do though is I start from a standing start and then put the wheel down in front of my feet and then roll out from a standing start to full body extension and then come back. There's a video there where I do like 10 of those from a standing start to full extension and back. And then there's videos where I do like one hand full extension push-ups on fingertips and stuff like that. Just crazy stuff that again, it's not impossible. And the stuff that I do, I don't see as bizarre or strange or unusual. I see it as perfectly natural and something that pretty much any human being, if they're really just taking care of themselves in a proper way, can do. So I don't view it as something that should really be thought of as outrageous and unusual. It should be normal. Everybody should be able to do this stuff, and you can if you just take care of yourself. But anyway, lookgreatnakedatanyage.com. And the other one, the thing that lookgreatnakedatanyage.com enables me to do, to be the most badass musician that I can be, that is expressed on another website called multimartinmusic.com. And you're one of the few that actually got the preview of the song that I just released a couple of weeks before it was released, and you can find that on there. So that's those are the two places I would send them: lookgreatnakedatanyage.com and multimartinmusic.com.
Listen, man, I could talk to you forever. I know you've got a show.
It's been great. I really, really enjoyed it, and it's over way too quick. I don't know how long it was, probably like way long, but I feel like we just barely started scratching the surface in a lot of ways. So yeah, let's do more. Yeah,
every time I talk to you, I feel so. What I want to tell folks is that, listen, Robert Martin here has got a show at the Whiskey A Go Go. Just casually, here's a guy who just, today I got a show at the Whiskey A Go Go.
Soon, yeah.
So that's just, this is the kind of opportunity that this kind of discipline will open up for you in your life. Can we get confirmation from you? I want to do this again and talk about Frank Zappa.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just real quick, let me mention that next year there will be, Frank died in 1993. However, we have technology now that Frank was interested in when he was still alive and wanted very much to do. It just wasn't well developed enough at the time. But next year, there is going to be a hologram tour with Frank as a hologram and me and various other Zappa alumni that actually played with Frank, playing with him on stage again. And it's going to be wild. It's not just going to be, like an image of Frank up. It's going to be wild. It's going to be very creative. His son, Frank's son, Amit, has really got a head that's pretty wide open, as you might expect for the son, the prophet Frank Zappa. And he's come up with some ideas for this hologram tour that are just going to be mind-boggling. So that's going to be wild. And I'll actually turn 71 while I'm out there on that tour.
Well, I'm going to catch one of those shows no matter what, man. I'll make a point of that, and I'll maybe I'll post which one I'm going to, so maybe some of the listeners can come out and join us all for a little after show or something. That'd be a hell of a lot of fun if we can find the right one. So where can people find the dates for that? Is that on multimartinmusic.com as well?
The dates have not been set all yet. They're working on the schedule right now, but that will be coming up. It doesn't start until February of 2019, February of next year. So, but in the next couple of months, you'll start to see the schedule getting fleshed out. And I'll definitely be posting that on multimartinmusic.com, and also I'll be posting it on Facebook as well.
Awesome. Beautiful, brother. Always great talking to you. And I'm very much looking forward to the next one. We get to dig into the madness of training with Frank Zappa.
Oh, Lordy. Yeah, that'll be fun. That'll be fun.
Sure will indeed. All right, my man. Enjoy your show tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you so much. I think everybody's probably going to enjoy this a lot.
I hope so. I did.
Yeah, same here. All right, take care, bud.
Later, my friend.